Alright, so here we got a single line diagram. We have a 120 volt panel. We have one 2 gang box with a single switch in it controlling light A and a 3-way switch controlling light C, right? Which is branching off into a single gang box which has a 4-way switch, so a double pole, double throw switch controlling light C, which is over here, branching off to another 2 gang box with switch B, which is a single pole, single throw, controlling only light B, and then the second 3-way switch controlling light C. And then we also have a receptacle that is uncontrolled. You can tell that by it's not blacked out at all, right? So it's just a receptacle that's live all the time. So the best way that I like to do these ones is to draw a schematic diagram of what's going on in this circuit. So to start, let's do just the single pole, single throw switch controlling light A, right? It's a very simple drawing. It's a single pole, single throw switch, so we have 120 volts up here. Okay, we have a single pole, single throw switch controlling light A, right? Again, just do the rough copies for these guys. No point in wasting your time doing a good copy. Right, so I have switch A, so I'm going to call this switch A right here, right, controlling light A, and that one's complete, right? Then I have my 3-way, 4-way, and 3-way, right, controlling light C, one light, right, which I can draw out. We know that's going to be 2 3-way switches sandwiching between, sandwiching a 4-way switch. So it's going to be 3-way switch going to a 4-way switch. Again, just doing a rough. Okay, 4-way switch down here. Okay, so that's the 3-way, S3, S4, and S3, right? And those are going to be feeding light C, right? So that's again this 3-way, 4-way, and 3-way, all controlling one light labeled C. Okay, so that's those guys. The last one we have is a single pole, single throw switch controlling light B, which again is just like this one up here. It's just a single pole, single throw switch controlling light B. Okay, and that's called switch B. Alright, and the last thing we have is this receptacle here, which has no control devices controlling it. It's just live like a regular receptacle. So we're literally going to go from one pole to the other, put our receptacle right up here, and that is it. Okay, now, so that's all the actual devices and loads in this circuit. Now what I do is I go through this circuit and all the actual wires and what they're labeled as. So I can go through and say that's a hot, that's a hot, that's a hot conductor, and this is a hot conductor, right? Switch A going to light A is going to be switch leg A, right? Going to light A, and then unidentified going from light A back to your source. The first 3-way switch going to the 4-way is going to be a traveler on each, so 2 travelers there. The 4-way switch going to the next 3-way, those are also travelers, right? And then the last 3-way switch going and feeding light C is going to be your switch leg C, and then from light C going back to your panel is going to be the identified. Switch B feeding light B is going to be switch leg B, right? And then B going back to the panel is going to be the identified. And then I already got my hot feeding my receptacle, and my receptacle back to the source is going to be my ID. Right? So now you can take all these conductors here and transfer it down onto your single line diagram. So out of my panel, we'll just do the first guy here. So light A being controlled by switch A, right? So I have, out of my panel, I have a hot conductor coming out to switch A, and that's exactly what we have here. A hot conductor coming to switch A. Switch A is going to be a switch leg going to A light, right? So here's switch A, here's light A. So from switch A going to light A, I have a switch leg labeled A going to my light, and then my light going back to my source is my identified. So I'm going to have light A going back to my source, which is my panel. I'm going to have an identified in there. So an ID there. The ID has to continue on all the way through and go back to my panel. All right, so that's the first one. So that is done. Okay, the second guy, I have a hot coming to my first three-way switch. So hot conductor is already coming in here. It's already in this box coming to the first three-way switch here. All right, the three-way switch then goes to the four-way with two travelers. So this three-way switch going to this four-way is going to have two travelers traveling, and they always travel in pairs. Okay, so three-way switch to four-way switch, I have two travelers. Okay, my four-way switch going to my second three-way, I have two travelers. So this four-way going to my second three-way, I have two travelers traveling through. Right, and then from that second three-way, I have switch leg C going to light C, and from light C, I'm going identified back to my source. So going over here, I have my second three-way switch going to light C, so I'm going to have switch leg C going to light C, and then an identified coming all the way back to my panel. Right, so I'm just going to move this down here. Right, so I have to have an identified in here coming all the way down back to my panel, which means I need to add it in here. I need to add it in here, and it's already in here, so I don't need to add anything else in. Okay. All right, the next one. So that's done. I have a hot going to switch B. So switch B is over here. So I need to bring a hot conductor all the way over, not the travelers, but an actual hot conductor. So I have a hot in here, which is in this box right here. So I can continue it on. I can bring a hot all the way through to switch B. Switch B has switch leg B feeding light B. Right, so there's light B right here. So switch leg B is going to go from switch B to light B. So switch leg B is right there. Right, going to light B, and then light B, of course, has an identified coming all the way back. So I can chuck an identified in there. Right, there's already an identified in here going to light C. Right, so I don't have to put another one in, and we are done that row. All right, now the last one we have here is a hot conductor feeding my receptacle, my uncontrolled receptacle. So I have a hot conductor coming all the way through already into this box here. Right, all I need to do is branch it off and bring it down to this receptacle. So I'm going to put a hot conductor in there. And then of course I need to bring an identified from this receptacle all the way back. Right, so I'm going to bring an ID up into this box where there's already an identified conductor in there, and I'm done. Okay, so that one is complete. Okay, now we have to remember we have to have an identified for all my switches that are controlling lights. Well, we have an identified in every box here that has a light switch in it, so we are good to go. We don't have to worry about that. Okay. All right, the next one is a little more complicated. Not very, but okay. Again, we have a 120 volt panel. We have light A. We have light PC, which is light a pole chain, right? Which means the actual switch, this is a switchable light. The actual switch is inside here, so it's not being controlled by an outside control device. So it's built in. All right. We have a receptacle that's uncontrolled. We have switch A, which is controlling light A, which means it's a single pole single throw switch. Right. We have switch B, which is controlling receptacle B, but only the controlled side. This side here is uncontrolled, right? And then we have switch C, controlling receptacle C, which is fully controlled by this switch, right? So, again, to start off, we draw our schematic diagram. 120 volts. Nice and messy. All right. Okay. So let's do switch A. Just gonna try to fix this here. Sorry. All right. So switch A is controlling light A. Right. So it's a single pole single throw switch. So we can just have a single pole, single throw switch controlling light A, like so. That's switch A. All right. Then we have, let's do our pole chain light. Okay. Now it's a pole chain, so we are just going to have LPC. Okay. We don't have a control device feeding that light. It's already built into this light, so we don't have to worry about it. So we just need to bring a hot conductor to it. Okay. Then we have a receptacle here, which is not controlled at all, which means it's always hot. So like the last diagram, we just bring a hot conductor all the way over to a receptacle, and that's done. Again, sorry this is so messy, but don't want to waste your time. All right. Then we have switch B controlling receptacle B, which is only half controlled. Right, and this is where it gets kind of weird. Okay. So this receptacle here is not labeled at all, which that's fine. We can just call it receptacle X. Let's just do that so we don't get confused. All right, so let's have switch B controlling receptacle B. Okay, so it's going to be a single pole, single throw switch controlling receptacle B. Okay, now it's only controlling half of this receptacle. So what we do is we draw another rung in controlling that same receptacle, which is labeled B, but I can say that it's not controlled. Right? So the black portion here is controlled, the other side is not controlled. Right? So what we have here is we have switch B controlling the left-hand side of receptacle B, and then we have nothing controlling the right-hand side of receptacle B. Okay? Then we have to look at switch C. Switch C is controlling receptacle C, which is fully controlled. Right? So again, it's going to be a single pole, single throw switch controlling receptacle C. And that's going to be switch C. And that's fully controlled. Right? So we don't have to do the second receptacle that's not controlled. Right, so that's all of it. That's all our loads and devices for that drawing. So again, we're going to go through. We're going to put all our identifiers there. So it's going to be switch leg A and identified. These are all ID. Okay, we're going to have a hot conductor feeding the light with the pole chain. We have a hot conductor feeding the receptacle, which is uncontrolled. We have a hot conductor feeding switch B, and then switch leg B feeding the controlled side of the receptacle. And we have a hot conductor feeding the uncontrolled side of the receptacle. And we have a hot feeding switch C, and with switch leg C is feeding the fully controlled receptacle. Okay, so then going through this single line diagram, we know we have a hot and identified always coming out of our panel. Okay, so we'll do the first one, which is switch A controlling light A. So I'm going to bring a hot conductor all the way down to switch A. So I need to bring a hot through all the way down to switch A. Switch A is then going to have a switch leg A coming back to light A. So switch leg A coming back up to light A. And then light A has an identified coming back, which we already have an identified in this raceway here. Okay. The next one is we have a hot conductor feeding our pole chain light. So we have a hot conductor here already. We have a hot conductor here already. We already have a hot conductor in our pole chain light. It's already being switched inside there, so we don't have to worry about switch legs, right? But we need to bring an identified back to my panel. I have an identified here, but I don't have one here, so I need to chuck in an ID here. Okay, and those are those two. The next one, I have a hot conductor feeding my uncontrolled receptacle X right here. So I have a hot conductor already coming through all the way to pole chain C. I just need to continue it on to receptacle X, right? And I need to have an identified from receptacle X going back to my panel. So I need to chuck in an identified in that pipe there. All right. Next one I have for my controlled receptacle B, I have a hot conductor coming to switch B. Right, so my hot conductor is going to come to switch B. It's already all the way over to receptacle X. I just need to bring it down to switch B. All right, switch B is going to have switch leg B going to receptacle B. So I'm going to move it down here. Switch B is going to have switch leg B coming down to the receptacle. Switch leg B coming down. Then I need to have an identified coming back all the way through. So I'm going to have an identified in there. It's going to be coming all the way up. And there's already an identified here and all the way through, so I don't have to add any more. Okay, but the second side, so that's the first one. The second side is uncontrolled, right? Which means I need to bring a hot conductor to receptacle B. So going down here, I have a switch leg already feeding it, but I also need to have a hot conductor feeding the other side, this side right here. Okay, and then there, of course, there's identified's already in there, so I don't have to add another one in. And then switch C, so that's that one. Switch C, I'm going to have a hot going to, which I already have a hot in this box here. I'm going to have switch leg C going to receptacle C, which is down here. So I'm going to have switch leg C going to receptacle C, and then an identified coming all the way back, which we already have an identified here, so that is that. Okay, so that's it. But the one thing you always have to remember is the new rule is you have to have an identified going to every switch that's controlling lighting. So we have an identified in this box here with switch B and switch C, but that's not controlling lighting. They're just receptacles, so we don't have to worry about that. But switch leg A is controlling light A, which is a light. So I need to have an identified coming down to switch leg A, or sorry, switch A, in the sense of I can put a smart switch or something in there. Okay, so you cannot forget to put those identifieds in, because it can ask you if this raceway is labeled A. They can say, hey, how many conductors are in raceway A? And it would be 3. Then they can ask you, okay, what conductors are those? Being identified, a switch leg and a hot conductor. Okay, so just make sure you don't forget about that one. I tend to forget about it sometimes, but I'm trying to get better at that. But hopefully that helps out and kind of walks you through those single line diagrams. Like I said, it's going to be pretty heavy for megs in second year, so try to get these under control. Watch the video over and over again, but please have ask me any questions you have. All right, thanks for watching.